It's different for women because men can be ambitious and that's like praise, and women are sometimes put in this position where they have to suppress their ambition to help the man get to where he needs to be. So it's like, yeah, I understand men need supportive partners as well, but man, it could really cost a woman.
Hey, girlfriends, welcome to another episode of Girlfriends and Goals. We're your hosts, Miosha.
And Samaria.
This podcast is a space where we'll talk about friendships, life goals, a little bit of pop culture, and all things womanhood.
Our top goal this year is to grow our podcast audience. So if you're new here or you're an avid listener of this podcast, please subscribe, leave us a 5-star rating, write a review, and be sure to share this episode with a girlfriend or two.
We'll get into our first segment in a moment, but before we do, we wanted to introduce our special guest who will be joining us for today's episode. You'll see why she's the perfect guest for this topic in just a moment, but before we do, we'll let her introduce herself. Welcome to the podcast, Maya.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. So tell the people who you are.
Oh my. So I am currently a creative director at Delta Airlines. That's not who I am. I hate starting off introductions that way with my career. I'm not attached to my career, but creative director, Delta Airlines. I've been in the creative industry for probably longer than I want to say on this podcast, about 15 years. Most of my career has been in retail, creative directing for some big box retailers like Home Depot, Macy's Corporate, Comcast, NBC Universal, and most recently Delta Airlines. We live in Atlanta. We are at home. The we in that statement, my husband, son, daughter. I am politicking hard for a dog, but right now, we're not able to get one. So it's just the four of us. And we've been here kind of, like I said, raised our kids here, had most of my career here, took my show on the road for a couple years, and then came back to the A because we just love it here.
Yes. Okay.
Nice.
And I'm glad you started with your career because we want people to know that we know somebody.
Shoot, I know somebody. I'm on this podcast. So.
Oh, look at you. So sweet. Okay. So before we get into our topic for today, we're going to start with our first segment, which is Girlfriend Check-In, where we ask a question from a conversation starter game or a book. And this week we're using We're Not Really Strangers, which is our favorite. And the question for today is, what title would you give this chapter in your life? So Maya, we're going to have you start us off, please.
Wow, I get to start. I think this chapter is shine season. And I feel like the chapter is probably about 5 years long. And it really just kind of sums up where I am in my life, in my career, putting a lot of the self-doubt and, am I good enough? Do I belong here? Should I be here? Kind of aside, and really stepping into who I am and just shining and letting my light shine bright. So this is shine season.
Yes, that reminds me of Issa Rae's like she did
season.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm so glad to watch you shine and just to be in your life at this moment. She's a family member, guys, so that's why I'm so excited to have you here because we are just so inspirational, and to be related to you is really special. But anyway, Miosha, what title would you give this chapter in your life? I know.
I would give this chapter of my life finding balance. So I feel like I am still a new mom. I guess I'm not quite 2 years in. So I'd still classify myself as a new mom. And yeah, I feel like this is the season of me finding balance of like getting into my groove in terms of motherhood, but then also kind of like balancing that out with the other areas in my life that I have interest in. And I feel like I'm kind of just getting to a point where my son is a little bit older, independent. He's still small, but I'm able to have a lot more balance than I have had in the last year. So,
Nice. Okay, cool. So I think I would call this portion of my life maybe building blocks. And I really wish I had a more clever way of saying that, but I do feel like a lot of what I'm doing right now is just setting the foundation for the life that I want, the life that I envision. And it's a frustrating time, but also an exciting time. Exciting because I can literally see where I'm heading.
mhm.
And I know like every little thing that I do is adding up to this like bigger thing that I'm building. Frustrating because it's like, dang, we're not there yet, you know? And I'm very much, I want to be there. Like I'm a destination person. I don't even really
Mhm.
like traveling, but I like getting to my destination. Like if I could skip the airplane, skip the car ride, all of that, I would, and just get to the destination. So yeah, it's a frustrating time because of that. But you know, we're building. So yeah, that's what I would title this chapter in my life.
Okay.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get into this week's topic, which is ambitious women have it rough. So, based on Maya's introduction, we can probably already conclude that she's a pretty ambitious woman. She's also a wife, a mother, a daughter, a friend, all that good stuff. She likes to call herself a youth appropriator. So today we want to talk about being an ambitious woman, but also how that impacts every other relationship that you have and what it looks like to develop relationships that kind of complement your ambition rather than harm it. So, the first thing that I want us to do is respond to this thing that is always on the internet. People share it all the time. And it's ambitious women really only have two options: a supportive partner or no partner at all. So I want to know if you guys agree or disagree and why. Maya, I'm going to start with you.
I 100% believe that, you know, the thing is when you have a partner, and people talk about this idea of a partner, but really it's a union. And so you come together with your separate ideas and your separate thoughts and your separate ambitions and aspirations, and then you become one, right? So that person's ambition or aspirations become yours and vice versa. And so if y'all aren't aligned and unified, then there is no partnership, right? And so I think the statement seems a little absolute, where it's like there's a work there's a work up to that statement, right? So you can't come in the relationship and you're just like, hey, if you're not aligned with my ideas and my goals, then there is no us. I think you have to start building that brick by brick foundation and believing in that other person's dream, and seeing how you can help them accomplish what they're trying to accomplish, and then hopefully they do the same for you, and that's how the union begins. But it really isn't a thing of, I have my partner, they have their dream, that person has, I have my dream, and then we have to make it work. My dream is your dream, and we got to figure out how to get to that place.
Yeah, I know you
Yes.
guys talked about this on one of your most recent podcast episodes where you had your husband. It's called Love, Marriage, and Gender Balance. We'll include a link to the podcast in the notes, but I just enjoyed hearing you guys kind of talk about like where you guys have come from, but also like where you are right now, and that whole idea of you wanting to chase these dreams and him kind of being like the grounding person who's like supporting and all of that. So yeah, it was a really good episode. But Miosha, I want to hear your thoughts on that question.
Yeah, I agree with Maya in that the statement is pretty absolute, seems very black and white. So I guess my answer, if I just have to pick one, I'd give a third option.
That's not picking an answer. She created it. Okay, I'll let you have it.
Thank you. So similar to what Maya said, the third option would be where you come into the relationship knowing that you may have to put in work to help that partner understand the level of support that you need, and being very open and vulnerable about like action items in terms of support. So very specific ways that they can support you, because maybe not being specific can lead to assumptions, or they maybe just don't know exactly what you may need in terms of support. And then lastly, I think it may even be where you may have to compromise or delay certain goals, just because I think it could be unrealistic to think that you go an entire partnership or marriage where there's something that your partner may not be supportive of. So just having that flexibility. So I guess it's kind of like a meeting in the middle. And I just don't know that we'd be throwing away entire relationships or marriages just because there may be those things where it can take work to kind of like get to the same page about what support is. And there may just be those things where your partner may say, hey, like, I just can't get in line with whatever that is, whatever that idea is or thing that you want to accomplish. But I can't necessarily say that like you'd throw the relationship away or that it wouldn't work for some people.
Okay, got you. So I 100% agree with this statement. I understand where you guys are coming from with, oh, it's not, it's very absolute, but I kind of like that it's very absolute. Just as a young person who's kind of ambitious, right? I think I see the importance in, even if some things might take a little bit longer or I have to compromise along the way, just knowing that, hey, this person is still supportive, and the only delay is we have to figure out when is the best time to do it. But we're still trying to get to, like get you to a place where you can accomplish the things that you can accomplish. Like I remember being in my very early 20s, and I was in like this phase of discerning, okay, what do I want to do next? I was in my master's program, and I kind of went in thinking, oh, this is my last degree, right? But at a certain point, it hit me, okay, I'm kind of looking at that PhD, like, hey, girl, at a certain point. And I remember telling this guy who was around at the time, like, hey, I think that might be my next move. I don't really know. And his response was, why do you need a PhD? There are plenty of people doing XYZ and they don't have one. And like, that was one of the moments where I was like, oh yeah, this person's not going to be in my life for a long time, because like every accomplishment that I'm talking about making, they're making it seem like it's a threat to them or like it's some type of a competition. And so that's why I think I wholeheartedly agree with this statement. But again, I do understand where you guys are coming from with, hey, there might be some like things you need to give along the way. But at the same time, I do think it's either a supportive partner or no partner at all. I was talking to somebody about this, a man, and they were like, aren't those the only two options anybody has? And I was like, no. It's different for women, because men can be ambitious and that's like praise, and women are sometimes put in this position where they have to suppress their ambition to help the man get to where he needs to be. So it's like, yeah, I understand men need supportive partners as well, but man, it could really cost a woman not having a supportive partner.
Oh, yeah. And I can't speak for all men, but I do wonder in terms of like ambition or accomplishing certain goals, like, yeah, they do need a supportive partner, but do they feel like it would be a hindrance if she wasn't? Or would he think like, oh, there's no way this relationship could move forward if she's not on board? Yeah. From my experience, I think most men are like, oh, I'm moving forward anyways. Like, this is what I want to do. And I think they may be not as mindful about that support factor, and like, oh, if she's not in agreement, I think they're just more likely to say, hey, this is a goal I want to accomplish. I'm going to move forward.
Exactly. And so, Maya, I want to kind of hear from you, just because we're talking about ambition and how it affects like other relationships. This is just the first relationship, like dynamic we're talking about. But I guess besides being that supportive partner, what are some other attributes that you feel like are essential for someone who's romantically connected to an ambitious woman?
You know, the statement you said your friend made in reaction to your goals, I think lacks just a level of support, obviously, but just curiosity, right?
Mm,
So it's almost like you want someone who's they might not be 100% aligned with where you're going, but tell me more about it.
yeah.
What makes you think this credential is going to get you to a different place? Because I think there are instances where another piece of schooling, credentialing, or whatever, it might not be what you need,
Mhm.
but just to shut it down and just to say, there are people doing it and they're doing just fine. It just lacks a level of, wanting to know more, wanting to hear from you, wanting to understand what you're trying to get to. And then maybe I counsel you and say, hey, okay, why don't you stay on this path for a little while? And then if it still feels like you need the degree to get to where you're going, then reassess. Or, if you really do feel, now that you've told me why,
Mhm.
curiosity, now I have the answers and the reasons why, that does seem like a good idea. My mind can be changed, right? So it's curiosity and flexibility in that you are going to have reactions. Your partner, your spouse is going to have a reaction where they came from, who's around them, what their support system looks like, what they have done in their lives or what they've seen other people do and their goals, right? I have a husband who was like, okay, I'm good. He did his technical training. He got to where he wanted to go and he's like, done. But he supported me along the way. And he has sometimes said, you know what? You have an associate's degree and you're at Comcast NBC Universal as a senior creative director. Are you sure you really even want to go back? Tell me more about what you need. And I would say, I feel like I haven't finished what I started. And he was like, I got that. Like, I understand. And you should go do this. Let me see how I can support you. So I think having that flexibility to have your mind changed is so important. And then that curiosity for what someone else is thinking, feeling, wanting is crucial.
Yes, Miosha, what do you
Yes.
think?
Yes, I definitely agree with the flexibility. I'd also add just being willing to think outside of the box and open to taking risk. So, you yourself may have those attributes. You're the person that's ambitious, but I think if you share those attributes in common, it can make them supporting you that much easier.
Nice. My answer pales in comparison to y'all's, but I'm gonna just throw it in there. I was gonna say just security. So that way, like the things that I'm trying to do, or when I'm at a certain level and still trying to get to that next level, you're not feeling insecure. About, oh, this girl's trying to do too much. Like you can be supportive because you're very secure in who you are and what your goals are, and you can be that support because you don't have any beef with me. Like you're not jealous of my accomplishments or envious of me in any way. So I think just having that sense of security in himself.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So Maya's been a mom. Well, she's well into motherhood. I don't want to say how many years, even though Samaria put that on there. So Maya has been well into motherhood. What has been the biggest challenge of being an ambitious woman while being a mother?
That's such a great question. I've been a mom for 23 years. And so I laughed when you said, I'm fairly new as a mom. You're going to always feel like you're new as a mom. Every year,
Oh,
you're like, oh, I'm new. Oh, look, they're doing this. I'm new, obviously. But I think the thing for me that has been, I don't know, not challenging, but what's the word I'm looking for? Perhaps it's a feeling of pressure and not even pressure, but acknowledgement that you have people looking at you, right? And not people on the outside. You have your children looking at you, people who you've told all these things to. Be confident. Go out there, stick your chest out, own the room. Don't worry about what other people say. You belong there. You can do it. You can be whatever you want to be. And you know you've said these things. You've instilled these things in them. And then you yourself are walking this walk where sometimes you don't know if you should be there. And sometimes you're questioning if you're strong enough. And sometimes you're wondering if you deserve, or if, you know, if people are going to find out you don't belong there, that imposter syndrome. And so I think it's really letting your kids see that you're human. And yes, I've told you to do these things. And yes, there are going to come times where you feel that doubt, but then what do you do with that? How do you press on? How do you convince yourself first? How do you lean on God to help you instead of leaning on what others think, and just really letting them see you go through that journey takes some of that pressure off, because it is hard, and you're going through things. My daughter right now, I mean, I come home and I try to, or if I get off of a call, I try to kind of check sometimes what I'm saying and what I'm putting out there, because I know there's an effect on her. And so it's just letting them see you be human, but then also remembering that you have these people who are watching you, and kind of taking the ways that they're going to showcase their ambition by watching you.
Ooh, that's a whole word.
Okay, listen, motherhood 101. Let me get my notebook out and take notes. So I kind of want to pivot a little bit. We've talked about like romantic, we've talked about your relationship as a mom to your children, but how does being ambitious kind of play a role in the people you surround yourself with, like the friends that you have? How do you see your ambition playing out in your friendships?
I think it's a little bit like selecting your spouse with your friends. So I also hear, you know, that absolute statement of either you have a supportive spouse or you have no spouse at all. I think the same kind of is true, but I've heard people say, you know, once you get to certain places, you can't take the friends that you had to the next level. And I always disagree with that, because I kind of feel like the friends that you select in the first place, wherever you are, should be the friends. You should be discerning about the friends you select, right? So if you're selecting a friend, or you befriend someone, you know, if that person down the line, if I make money, if I become this, or if I get to this next level, you know who's kind of ride or die to start. And that's based on just the relationship you have when you're at the same level, right? And so I sort of feel like, because this is why I talk about this all the time. Mike Vick had a bunch of friends, and people were like, hey, he should have known those guys. You got to leave those friends behind. They should have been his friend in the first place. Like, when he didn't have any, like, why were you friends with people who would completely tarnish your reputation and make you look a hot mess? You don't have to leave those people. Just don't bring them along in the first place before you had anything, right? And so I think for me, I don't have a lot of friends. I have, you know, family. I have my husband. I have a few close friends from high school. I have acquaintances. And those people are kind of like, hey, hi, bye. You know, we see each other. We invite each other to functions, gatherings. But the people who have been in my life that are supportive, that I call them a friend, they would have supported me. They have helped me on the journey. They have given me advice, and they're not always where I am either. I have friends that are managers and senior managers, and friends that are just individual contributors, but they've always supported me, and they've always been happy for me. And that's how they were when I wasn't in this position, and that's how they are now. So I think you just choose wisely in the first beginning.
Stay ready so you don't have to get ready.
Listen,
Thank you. Thank you.
You won't have to trim the tree if it's already lean.
Okay.
Y'all, you better come through with all these cliche little statements. But When you first said it's like choosing your spouse, I was like, dang, like that. But as you started talking, I'm like, okay, there's actually something there. And I love that you're saying, okay, they're on different level. Like all my friends don't have to be on a C level, if I'm on a C level. And I love that because I think sometimes that's how people look. Like I remember starting at a company out of college, and the lady in HR was like, hey, it's cool that you're hanging around with these people, but those aren't the types of people who I want you to like cling to. And I was just like, I got where she was coming from. She's an older Black woman. I was like bright eyed and bushy tailed, so I understood where she was coming from. But I also, even at that young age, knew where I was going and what I wanted. And I wasn't going to be swayed by anybody who wasn't, going in that same direction. So I just love that you mentioned that you can be on different levels. Miosha, did you have anything that you would look for in friends, just because you're, by nature an ambitious woman?
So I can't say in the past that I've looked for specific traits, but I do think that having a certain level of ambition is something that I do have in common with my friends, specifically the ones that I've been close with for a while. So like you and I do think that we have that in common, even taking on this podcast, as we've mentioned before, is kind of a coming to life of that. I definitely have been inspired by my friends, but I'll say that I'm also mindful that like ambition shows up in different ways for different people. So, like how Maya said, like everyone in your friend group doesn't have to be at the same level, doing the same things, and just being able to support your friends and it going both ways, no matter kind of like where they are. And if anything, I'd encourage my friends to be ambitious about creating the life that they want and use that as the motivation for the things that they're doing, whether it's writing a book, getting a degree, deciding you want to homeschool your children, whatever that is, be ambitious about that. And I'd hope that they'd encourage me to do the same.
Yeah, I've kind of seen that in myself where I'm like always, I don't want to say pushing, but I'm always, for certain friends, I'm like, oh, we could do more here, or there's a next level to be reached. And again, they're not people who are just like, oh, I'm just trying to like not do anything with my life. So I think they accept it well, unless they talk about
Mhm.
me behind my back. But I do think it is something that I always have to be mindful of. Like you can't push people farther than where they're trying to go. And as you were talking, Miosha, I was just thinking about that. Like, oh, have there been moments where I'm like, oh no, we got to get to Mars and we're still here. But like you said, also, I am inspired by a few of the people who are in my circle. Like they keep me going. Like I see the amazing things that they're doing, and I'm like,
Mhm.
man, like if they can do that, what can I accomplish? Or like, oh, I must be, close to their level if they're associating with me. Like it kind of gives me confidence to go out and achieve the things that I want to achieve too.
Yeah. And I also think timing is important as well. Like I think about with you and I, where like there have been times where, I have felt like, oh, I want to be that encouraging person and push her to go further, but the timing maybe just wasn't right. So just being able to like read the room, give it time. And it's not to say that I can never say something about it, but just be mindful.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So when we think about movie characters that embody ambitious women, Terry from Soul Food is that woman. But in that movie, her being ambitious and successful led to the family kind of taking advantage of her. So, Maya, can you tell us about your experiences in being an ambitious woman and how that has played out with your either extended or immediate family or with friends?
I don't think anyone in my extended or immediate family has taken advantage of me based on where I am. I do think, uh, families, my husband's family, my family, they're different sides, mom, dad's side, for the most part, people have been super supportive and sometimes confused about why I continue to keep pushing and keep going. And sometimes, you know, because it's, again, like I said, how they grew up or what they've seen or what they envision to be a traditional wife, mother role. There have been times where, there were a lot of times where, you know, I was at school and my husband would have to come home and cook, and would come home late and then I'd have to study. And so he picked up a lot of those traditional things you do at home. And some people were confused by that, but I don't think, you know, I don't think there's been an instance where they took advantage of the situation. I think they just wanted to understand why we were doing things a little bit differently than they may have. And you know, the thing is, with family and friends, it's boundary setting, right? So, you know, at some point, you're letting yourself be taken advantage of. And so you just have to figure out, you know, where the line is, and draw it and make sure it's bright so people know not to cross it, and you should be fine.
Yeah, just a follow up to what you said. In those moments where people were like confused or just not understanding why you guys are doing what you were doing, did you feel like, oh, I need to explain, or where you have the mind that, okay, I don't really need to explain why we're doing what we're doing. We're aligned. We know where we're going, and you'll find out when we get there.
Sometimes, sometimes we felt like we had to explain. I think the thing that helps my husband and I feel like we're such a team is that if it was my family that had questions, you know, then he would kind of stick, he would always kind of stick up for, or if it was his family that had questions, he would always stick up for me. And if it was my family who had questions, then I would say, you know what, my husband supports it. We just kind of knew when to jump in for each other. And I think that is so key when you're not the one fighting the battles and answering the questions and feeling like you're explaining yourself to everyone, but your partner comes in and says, hey, look, I know you think I should have a hot meal on my plate when I get home, but I love coming home and cooking, and I love, you know, making sure I'm there for my wife because I want her to reach these goals, because when she reaches these goals, we reach these goals, and vice versa. It was the same thing. I mean, there were times where Vincent was, early when we first got married, he had an injury, and a lot of his work was based on whether he was mobile. And so I held it down, and he, until he got well. And so we never feel like we have to fight the battle ourselves. We always jump in and help each other kind of say, you know what, if she loves it, I really love it. Or if he loves it, I love it. And so there's never a time where we feel like we're on that battlefield alone.
Love,
Nice.
I love that you brought that up because I feel like really no matter what direction you take, you know, people will have feedback. So if you are the person who decides to stay home with your children, and for some women, their families will say, oh, well, why are you staying home? But just being aligned and being in sync with your partner so that no matter how people are reacting, you're standing together as a unit, as like, hey, this is a decision that we made. We support each other. And you don't have to go around, like you said, explaining yourself to people no matter what direction you take.
Yes. So on last week's episode, and you kind of alluded to this in the beginning, so I just want to hear maybe a story or something from your career. But last week's episode, we talked about the tendency that women have to sell themselves short, or maybe not be as assertive about our strengths and why we deserve certain positions. So since you've had this amazing career, can you tell us about a time where you were maybe in that timid phase or didn't sell your skills, and how you had to move past that?
So I think there have been periods of my career where I was more timid than I am now, right? And it takes a lot of work to get you from there to here to yonder. But I'll tell you, it was actually at the height or peak of my career when I was a senior director. I was at Comcast NBC. I had an associate's degree. I would go into meetings with people who had master's degrees, PhDs. They went to Ivy League schools. I went to art school, even though I was in the same room. So obviously, I was in the room for a reason. I didn't just walk in there and just had a seat. Somebody hired me to be in the room, but I was always really just sizing myself up against other people and looking at what they had and looking at their credentials and looking at what I thought I didn't have. And it was self-sabotage, honestly, because everybody in the room thought I should be there. Everybody I was around felt like I should be there. There was no one I don't even think people knew my credentials or my background. They just assumed I should be in those rooms, right? And so I think you're your biggest critic, your biggest enemy, your biggest self-sabotage, like you sabotage your progress and your ambition and your goals. And you have to be able to dig deep and just say, hey, look, I belong here. God gave me the favor to be here. You're not always, what is the saying? The qualified aren't always called, but once you're called, he qualifies you, something like that.
Girl, close enough.
Close enough. And so you just have to know that he called you in this place and he's going to make sure you're qualified to be in the room. Now, you might have to learn a little bit more, hustle a little bit more, or make sure you're a little sharper. And that's always the case. Even if you are degreed to the 10th, you still have to hustle a little bit more and be sharper. But to take yourself out of the game when you were actually recruited for the game is silly.
Whew, I'm gonna put that on the t-shirt. But I like that, like, because I feel like we do that. We take ourselves out of the game when it's like everybody thinks you belong here. We're waiting for you to be a teammate with us, and you over here second guessing like everything that you bring to the table.
So Maya, I wanted to ask you, what is your favorite thing about being an ambitious woman, and what's your least favorite thing? Or you could pick one or the other.
I think my favorite thing about having big aspirations is that I'm constantly pushing myself. There is no status quo. Once and I've had to struggle with this piece a bit where I'm like, am I not grateful? Am I not, I get to one level and then I'm like, okay, what's next? And I think I've had to really balance, let me love the season I'm in and let me be grateful for where I am, but then let me know there's always more, and not necessarily more in terms of another title all the time. Like sometimes it's not another title. Maybe there's more to learn. Maybe there's more ways I can grow. Maybe there's some development I could be doing for myself to make me stronger or feel more confident. But there's always something more I could be doing. And so not resting on my laurels to say, you know what, I got to this spot. I'm done. I'm done learning. I'm done growing, just always pushing myself further. So I love that. I think if there's something, I can't really think of anything that I would say would be negative. There was a season where I wasn't very grateful or aware. I feel like I've always been grateful, but aware that you prayed to be in this moment and you're in this moment. So can you just pat yourself on the back, pat your family on the back for supporting you, give yourself some props instead of immediately looking for the next thing. And so that was a season that I think my ambition was a little bit toxic. But once I kind of learned that balance of, once you get to that place, be happy, be glad, and know that you've accomplished something, and then see what in this season, what you can do better. I think once I got to that place, it felt better.
Nice. I know you asked the question, Neosha, but I also want to hear your answer.
I'd say my favorite thing is definitely the feeling of accomplishment. like once I get to the point where, okay, I have this thing that I've been going after, just that feeling of enjoying what I have. But my least favorite thing is sometimes when I'm in the thick of accomplishing that thing and when I'm questioning myself, especially once it gets challenging or difficult, and I may have underestimated the amount of work or stress that comes with accomplishing said goal. Just questioning, like, oh, was this the right move? Do I really need to be doing this? And, especially if it's something that I was really pushing to do. And I'm saying to myself, like, girl, you wanted this. So you need to see it through. And so, yeah, I can't say that I enjoy like that part of the process. But obviously with certain things, it's not avoidable. So
Yeah, and I can agree with the feeling of accomplishment. Like I feel like I spend so much time just daydreaming about, oh, the day when I finally accomplish certain things, and once I'm there, I'm like, yes, this is amazing. I had daydreams about this and now we're here. I think
mhm.
my least favorite thing is that there is just always something else. Like sometimes I'm like, I am sick of you. Like you just did this thing and now there's something else. Like, what more do you want? Like how I mentioned, I thought, okay, the master's was it, and now it's something else that's going to take more years. It's like, girl, can you sit down somewhere? But also, there's that kind of fire in you where it's like you're not fulfilled until you take that next step because you feel like that's what you're called to do. So yeah, just that there's always something else. There's always something new, and I guess I should like that, but it's exhausting a little bit. I want to close off on this question just because there are so many ambitious women out here who are killing it right now. And so I want to hear each of your answers. And the question is, when you think of an ambitious woman, who comes to mind and why?
Okay, I'll jump in. I have an entire Pinterest board dedicated to this, right? So it's it's my Polished Women Shine Pinterest board, and there are so many different people within that one board, and I kind of pull different people just to keep myself motivated, and they all have different stories, right? And so yes, of course, the bigger names, Michelle Obama, and of course Issa Rae, we talked about her, and Beatrix Dixon, who is the founder of Honey Pot. Like, I just think her story is so amazing. But then I look at the women in my family, like my grandmothers, and just how they raised their children. And even my maternal grandmother, who left the home that she knew her entire life to come to America and take care of me. And that must have, just thinking about her walking me to to the bus stop in her, in her traditional African, lapa, and making sure I got to the bus stop, and just making sure I was getting what I needed to be ambitious, because she had kind of done that and lived her life and put her kids through school. And so I think about you two both starting a podcast, and how well it has done, and just thinking about ways to put content out for people like us, for women like us. And that wasn't there. These types of things and these types of programs led by women like you were not available to me when I was younger. I mean, so there are just so many people, and for different reasons, I think Miosha, you said this, you know, different types of ambition, right? Different reasons. I look at certain women and kind of say, you know what? Wow, I am so inspired by that person.
Nice.
I'll do mine next because it's somebody who you mentioned, but like I think it was last year I wrote down 3 names of people who I just felt like were killing it, and if I could have a little bit of their success, I would be happy. And those women were Patricia Bright, who is a YouTuber in the UK, Candy Burris, which I absolutely adore her. I don't even watch The Housewives, but I adore her story from like Escape and them like disbanding to being a writer. And she talks about, how she drove her little car that she had for a while. Like as she started making money, she was still driving that car. And so I think about her then and where she is now. And then the third person was Issa Rae because I stan, but also because I know the courage that it takes to put your art out there or something that you believe in, even if other people aren't necessarily believing in it, or if you don't have all the resources to bring it to what you feel like it should be, but just starting with a camera and some friends and y'all get together and do what you need to do. That starting point, I think, is very inspiring. And so for her to go from that to where she is now, I think is a big deal. And I'm always inspired by her. So yeah.
Yes, we love Issa Rae. A little bit obsessed.
Miosha actually introduced me to her. She like years ago when Awkward Black Girls, she was like, "You have to watch this," and that was when I fell in love. No, let me stop. but really, I was like, "This is amazing." Miosha,
Yes.
who's your person?
My person is my mom.
Aww.
Yes, when I think of an ambitious woman that I admire, it's her. And one of the things that I admire about her the most is how, even as she's gotten older throughout the different phases of her life, that fire and ambition is still there. Like she hasn't let maturing or age kind of slow her down. And even to the point where I'm like, okay, mom, might want to take it easy, but I just love that about her. She's always, trying to go after what she wants, and she's been able to do that throughout the different seasons of her life. And then the other thing that I admire is, even though she's always been ambitious and, has had pretty big goals, she has always let her children, myself and my sister, know just how important motherhood was for her. And so I know that, especially when we were younger, there were certain goals and dreams that had to be postponed or delayed. But then once she was able to do it, she didn't let the delay stop her or put that fire out. And it has really inspired me now that I'm a mom to kind of take that approach. And so, yeah, it's my mom. I really admire her. And when I think of ambition, I think of her.
Nice. Well, that is such a beautiful note to end on. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this podcast. Thank you, Maya, for coming on. We've enjoyed having you. You have to come back. We'll put all of her information in the box below so that you guys can follow her. But listen, you guys have heard our thoughts on this topic. We'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Girlfriends and Goals Podcast, where we'll continue this conversation over the next week. If you haven't subscribed already, please go ahead and do that now. Don't forget to rate, review, and share. Until next time, bye.
Bye.